morning, RockPointe Church. How are you? It is great to see you. I'm so happy to be here with you today. Thanks for joining us here in this room, Liberty Hill. Could we just say hello to our Liberty Hill family, y'all? Could we say? Right? I don't know if y'all can hear that, but there's a lot of cheers around for you. We love you and so glad that we're together in this. And then for all of those of you who are watching online, we're just glad that you're along for the ride at whatever point you may actually see this message. Well, look, but we're in this series, and I want to talk to you quickly before we dive into today's message about something that is super important, and yet it's also something that's vital around this time of year. And so I want to talk to those of you who are brand new around the church. Like maybe when I say brand new, I'm thinking maybe like this year, for maybe from January all the way around. Maybe this is kind of new for you. You're still kind of hanging in. You're trying this. You're starting to get the feel of it, and there's some things that are helping, there's some things that you like, and there's some things that are making a difference for your family, and you're still here like the rest of us because we're here for those same reasons. But there's a different reason beyond that for so many of us, and that is where we begin to invest to help other people with the same help that we've been helped with. And that's such an important part of following Jesus, is that we help other people like other people have helped us, and certainly like our Heavenly Father has helped us. And so if you're brand new around RockPointe Church, whether you're here in Leander or in Liberty Hill, and you're brand new, and when I say brand new, again, kind of from January around, or if over the summer you've just been traveling and you're back, right? Well, first of all, welcome home. We're always glad that you're around. You're always family to us when you walk in the door. But for those two categories of people, I want to talk to you for just a moment about our three greatest needs here at the church. Because sometimes we go like, well, I don't even know what the church needs. Does the church even have needs? Well, of course, and always. But today I want to give you the three top ones, and I want to invite you at this point in the year, because it's a really good time for us to think about this, to engage in one of these three areas. Now look, there's lots of areas, but what we did as a staff is we got together and we just said, what are our biggest needs right now? And so let me just tell you what they are, right? They're in three categories. They are production, like all the stuff that you see happening, Liberty Hill, all that stuff that happens for you and how you receive some of this and then how that is played out. And then for those of you here, all the stuff that you see that happens, that's production. There are people with us right now who are making this happen for all of the rest of us, and that's one of our greatest needs. It's one of the places that if you like technology, if you can run a computer, like look, if you're still putting CDs in a computer, probably not your place, right? But like if you've advanced a little bit and you know how to run your phone and all of that, this may be a place for you where you actually can serve and actually help. And so production is a big need for us around the church right now. Another one is students and kids, because they are the next generation. And us investing in the next generation is huge. We will do everything we possibly can to invest in the next generation. It's why we hire the staff that we have. It's why we ask people to volunteer and to serve students and kids. And here's the comment I hear often, particularly about kids, is like, I don't know enough about the Bible to tell someone else. And I'm just telling you, look, the best way to learn about who God is to take a kid's lesson, read it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that was pretty simple, and just tell a story to kids, right? It's literally, there are more people, Julie and I have helped more people grow in their faith by giving them kids' Bibles and say, just read this kid's Bible, and you'll know so much more. And so look, our kids and our students, they are our church. And they are certainly the future of our faith, and we want to invest in every way that we can. So it is our another of these top three needs. And then the last one is just guest services. People when they walk in, greeting them, saying hello, maybe making coffee, maybe tearing it down, maybe helping people feel welcome, maybe setting up chairs, maybe helping people find a seat, whatever the case may be. Guest services, where we literally just are like the first friendly person, because the truth is we're all pretty friendly, right? Wow. Okay. If it was that quiet in Liberty Hill, maybe we ought to just shut down today and start over, right? There are a few of us who are pretty friendly, right? There you are. I knew it about you. And so look, we're pretty friendly people, but we need some of those people out on the front line. Typically, we say if you have all your teeth, this is your ministry, right? My wife told me, you really got to stop saying that, but it's kind of fun. And the truth is like, look, if you're like one of those welcoming kind of people and and a hug's a good thing for you, obviously we're not going to hug everybody that walks in, but the truth is like you have that warm spirit inside of you. You love hosting, maybe in your home or other places. This might be the perfect place for you. And so here's what I'm telling you. There's 3 big needs right now, right? 3 places, right? It's production, it's kids and students, and it's guest services. And so I want to invite you, if you're brand new and you're like, okay, I'm here, how can I help? This is how you can help. If you've been off for the summer and maybe you've disengaged through the summer as far as serving because you were travel and you're back again, welcome back. It's time to re-engage. Or maybe it's been a really long time and you find yourself just coming, and this has been your church for a long time, and you find yourself just coming and consuming. It's time. And so I'm inviting you into those top 3 places. And today, at the end of the service, what I'm going to ask you to do is walk out of the auditorium doors to this connection center where it says, how can we help? And walk up to them and just say, I'm ready, and name one of those 3 things. And you go like, man, those 3 things, I don't know if I can do those 3. Then let me just tell you, there's a lot of others. Those are our top needs. And so I hear sometimes people say, does the church even need anything? Yes, constantly. So let's just be authentic about that. These are our top 3 going into the fall. And I tell you, here's what I know, is if we would all engage a little bit, we would have an abundance of what we need as a church family. So this is a little family meeting we got to have here, and it's a little family meeting to say it's time, let's go forward. One of those 3 places, production, kids and students, or guest services. As soon as the service is over, walk out the doors to that connection center and just tell them, I'm ready, and name one of those 3, and we will get you rolling along there. Deal? All right, I love that there is a deal with some of you, right? I love that. The rest of you, you've got the whole message to think about it, all right? Well, last week we kicked off a new series last week, and what's interesting is after the message last week, I had 2 unique conversations out on our patio. And what's interesting is one was with a 50-something-year-old business owner guy, and the other was with a 16-year-old girl who's a high school student. And what's so interesting about those conversations is both of them said the exact same thing. Here's what they said. Both of them said, this is a big deal in my life right now. And so I'm so glad that we've launched into this, no matter what your age or life stage. And I'll just tell you, this has been meaningful for me in my life as well so far. And so if you weren't with us last week, today we're continuing our series that we're calling Friendology, where this is about, for us, creating a culture of meaningful relationships in our lives, which, as we discussed last week, is something we learned that we were designed for. And one of the things that we proved last week, both from Scripture and from the Surgeon General's advisory from last year, because he put up a warning about an epidemic that no one was talking about, that is possibly the most significant epidemic in our nation's history, which was we are battling an epidemic of loneliness and isolation in our culture. And if you combine that report with the longest running study on happiness, which has been done by Harvard over the last, get this, 8 decades, if you combine that warning and that study on happiness and you put the 2 together, it is undoubtedly the truth that positive relationships keep us happier, healthier, and help us live longer. Last week, we talked about one of the significant barriers to these positive relationships is that we were more isolated than maybe ever before. And not only were we isolated, we were also insulated as well. And we're like less open today to others' ideas, and we're more closed off to people, and specifically people that disagree with us. But we're also becoming increasingly independent as well. Last week we talked about being isolated. Next week I want to talk about breaking out of this insulated mindset that our world is in. But today I want to talk about independence. And what's interesting is you don't really have to think too hard to see why we are where we are today. The reality is, all of us were taught from a young age that maturity in life is moving from dependency to independency. Like when you're able to do things for yourself, this is how you mature. Like when you can talk and walk and get dressed by yourself, when you can ride a bike and read and write, you can get yourself something to eat, and you can do the dishes, and you can do your laundry. And here's what we do. And when you do this, we call this maturity, a marker of maturity. When you do this, here's what we say. We're saying that you're on your own. It's a marker of maturity. And the phrase that we typically use, or a lot of times we've used, is that now you're able to stand on your own 2 feet. Or when you move out and you're on your own, you're not on your parents' in your parents' house or on your parents' payroll anymore. You like get a job and you start a career and you start taking on your own expenses. And you're making decisions of what to be or what to do or where to go and whenever you want to do that. And you're doing this on your own. And in our culture, this is what makes you an adult and mature. This is just a cultural norm for all of us growing up. That's what we were taught. And so what's the big deal? There have been several significant shifts in culture beginning all the way back in the 1970s that have led us down this unhealthy path. And maybe you're thinking in the 70s, that seems like a really long time ago. Well, not so much for some of us, right? And one of the things that has led us down this path is the devaluing of the family, which is where we got our initial model for what our relationships in our life should actually look like. But in our culture, when family is no longer seen as desirable or healthy, and as we talked about last week, 1 in 4 adults are estranged from their families. And many, if not most, have moved rather than maybe returning to their roots where they're known and where people have history with them. And family has been devalued and broken apart. And not only this, but and this one may seem like a strange one, but also our success and prosperity that we enjoy. This has made things more efficient. This has made things more effective, and we've become more prosperous because of it. And yet this has led to greater isolation. And what's interesting is more than anything else, the internet and social media take the blame for this social isolation. But all sociologists agree that there's something else that was the godfather of something that separated us. And it began to isolate us as a society long before the internet and social media. And it took off in the 60s and the 70s. And it's something now that we all do on a regular basis, which is watch television. I mean, think about this. In 1950, in the 50s, right? In 1950, only 20% of American households had a TV. Less than 30 years later, in 1978, 98% have had a TV. Can you imagine a household today where there's not a TV? In fact, there's multiples like in every room. And you go, okay, well, so what? People are watching TV. Here's the thing, and sociologists agree, more than anything else, this began to isolate people because it kept them at home instead of going out. Instead of going out for entertainment and spending time with friends, ironically, it kept us at home watching shows like Full House and Family Matters and Fresh Prince and Big Bang and Friends. And instead of having them, we were watching them on TV. And these shows that are all about relationships, and we didn't realize it, but it was isolating us. And instead of engaging in friendships, we were watching other people engage in friendships. Another thing that happened was there was an openness to psychology, which, by the way, I got to tell you, I'm really, really grateful for this, because when I was growing up, like my parents' generation, psychology was still kind of weird. And if you had a therapist, there was something really, really wrong with you. And then we realized, oh, there's really something really, really wrong with everybody, and everybody really needs some help from time to time. And so a professional can actually help you understand what that chemistry is happening in your body and in your mind and your emotions. And we've learned a whole lot about mental health, haven't we? And it's helped. But there's at least one significant negative consequence from this openness to psychology. And this is what is called the self-help movement. And an openness to psychology is what birthed the self-help movement. And you may go, well, but it's helped a lot of people. And it has, but here's what it actually did. The main thing that the self-help movement did was cause us to leave behind JFK's mantra of ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And from the mid-60s to the late 70s, we were all about how do I get help? How do I help myself? How do I make myself better? And by 1980, the main focus of conversation in our country, it literally was a study. What was driving economics, our conversation, career paths that people were moving towards? For the first time, American language became about personal ambition. And for the first time in American history, it was no longer about collective commitment. The community above or ahead of ourselves was left behind. And the American public's top priority, this won't surprise you, became me. This is what fostered a culture of you do you. You live your best life. Just treat yourself right. Do what's best for you. That's what you're supposed to do. And we didn't realize this, but the self-help movement got us all as a society back to our list to focus on self. And we moved from a culture of collectivism to a culture of individualism. And never does that end well for societies or individuals. And when you're trying to do life on your own and family gets devalued and success and prosperity come along and it's a part of what you're doing and it's like you're forced to focus on self. And none of this leads us to a good place. Let me tell you, this isn't the first time this has happened though. And so today, I want to take you to a really familiar story in the life of King David, who was the second king of Israel. And what I want you to do in this story is I want you to see the progression of what happened in his life as well. It's from 2 Samuel chapter 11. Here's what it says. In the spring of the year, when kings normally go out to war, David sent Joab and the Israel army to fight the Ammonites. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. So David stayed behind and he sent his commanders, he sent his warriors off to war. And late one afternoon, after his afternoon nap, because David is, as some people say, living high on the hog, he's living his best life. David gets out of bed in the middle of the day one day, and he walks out onto the patio, the palace roof, and as he looks out over the city, he noticed a woman of, get this, unusual beauty, and she's taking a bath. And he sent someone to find out who she was. And he was told, she's Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Now, I don't want you to miss the humanity in what we just read. Right? There's so much humanity in this because think about this. This was a real life conversation that happened between David and this person that went out. In fact, this is David going, good Lord, who is that? Like who is that? I got to know who that is. She is so unusually beautiful. She's like, wow, who is that? I got to know. I got to know so bad that I'm going to send somebody. So, hey, you, come here, right? And he sends somebody off to find out. And you know what they come back and say? They come back and they say to the king, bro, that's somebody's daughter. Bro, that's somebody's wife. Stay away from that. But remember, there's nobody there to challenge David because David's top commanders and advisors and warriors are off at war. And so look at this. David sends a messenger, and that's all they were. right? They were just a messenger. They're not there to give any advice. They're not there to do anything to tell him what to do. They are simply just, he sends a message to get her. And when she came to the palace, he slept with her. Now, look at this. This is crazy. You want to see a reflection of our culture today in this story? Here's what happened. David stayed behind. Y'all bring that up, next slide up for me. David stayed behind on his own because what everybody else was out doing was beneath him. And he didn't need to do that because his advisors and his warriors did the stuff he used to do. And then he takes someone's wife, devaluing the family, disregarding the value of the family, and he commits adultery. And then David elevates his own desires because of his success and his prosperity. He's going to get what he wants, and so what does he do? He says, go get her. I'm focused on myself. I mean, it is the exact same thing we see when you live in a culture that says you do what you do you because what you do doesn't affect other people. Just do you. You can handle success. You can handle failure. The rewards, you can handle that. You can handle the consequences because you can live independently of other people. And if you're paying attention, you already know that's just not true. But the people that were around him, what could they say? I mean, he's the king. They probably saw disaster coming. We certainly can see it. But David couldn't see it. And that's at least in part because success is blinding. I mean, some of you know this. The more success you've had in the past, the more you lose sight of future threats. We begin to feel somehow untouchable. Like nothing can take me down. The more successful, the more powerful you are, the more that's true in your own mind. Look, success is not only blinding, it's also intoxicating. Wealth and prosperity impairs our judgment, causing us to do things we wouldn't normally do because we can. Not because we should, but because we can. And what both do is they tempt us to elevate ourselves. And so now you have not only the temptation to do something, now you have the capability to do it. And maybe you know what happens next in the story. Maybe you've heard this, but Bathsheba is pregnant now. And so David does what powerful and successful people do. He leverages his power to control the situation and to ease the consequences. And he clearly has elevated his desires and his reputation as the priority over and above everyone else who might be involved. This is how David sees himself over the community, over all the other people that could potentially have been involved here. And so what David does is he sends for Uriah, the warrior husband of Bathsheba, who's out to war. And he has him come home from the front lines pretending that he wants a report on how things are going in the war. But really, this was all just his scheme to get Uriah to come home and sleep with his wife Bathsheba so that they would think that it's his child and not really David's child. Clearly, they didn't have DNA testing back in the day. And so he gets the command to come home. Uriah comes home, and David wines him and dines him and says, hey, go home, spend the night with your wife. And 2 times, David tries to get him to go home and sleep with his wife, even one time after getting him totally drunk. And Uriah refuses to go home. And David doesn't understand why Uriah won't go home. And so he asks him, he's like, Uriah, what's going on? Why won't you go home? Why do you keep sleeping on my doorstep every night? And look at what Uriah says. Uriah replied, the ark, you remember Raiders of the Lost Ark, Ark of the Covenant? That's what that is. The ark and the armies of Israel and Judah are living in tents. And Joab, my commanding officer, and my master's men are camping in the open fields. Can you see the contrast? Instead of seeing himself as special above everyone else, Uriah sees the community and elevates others above his own desire. And he goes on. Here's what he says. He says, how could I go home to wine and dine and sleep with my wife? I swear I would never do such a thing. And you would think that at this point, David would be thinking, oh my gosh, what have I done? You're right. But that's not what happens. David actually has Uriah killed. And here's how he does it. He sends a sealed envelope, a sealed note back to Joab with Uriah. Take this to your commanding officer. And in the sealed document is Uriah's death orders. And the death orders say this: put Uriah out on the front lines of the war and give the command to pull everyone back, but don't tell Uriah, so that he's struck down. And they do it. And Uriah is killed. And then David takes Bathsheba to be one of his wives. I mean, come on. You should read the Bible. Isn't that better than Netflix? I mean, I promise you it's better than Netflix. And so David has handled it. Crisis averted. The baby's born, and then the baby dies. And there's consequences for David. And lots of people close to him are hurt, and he undermines his own reputation with everyone around him by doing this. And his greatest failure is documented, and it's written down in history. You say, where? We're reading it today. His greatest failure is documented, not where anyone wants to be. See, while success is blinding and intoxicating, this kind of failure is humiliating. And isn't it true that it's difficult to humble yourself when you're struggling? Isn't it true that it's hard to be vulnerable when you're struggling and just tell other people what's really going on? Especially when you've screwed up big. I mean, it's just really difficult. And so because of that humiliation, we do what David did. We hide and we try to handle it. And we isolate ourselves. And the difference in the two situations between Uriah and David is how you see yourself in relationship with the community around you. And look, if you think I'm being a little dramatic about this today, it's okay. Just go read the studies, the Surgeon General report. This is vitally important to where we are today. That if we don't see ourselves in deep need of being embedded in healthy, functional, supportive community, we will be isolated and we will act independently. Which is exactly where we are today in our culture, because never, ever have we been more divided than we are right now. Because focus is on self and personal ambition. Do you see how critical the web of relationships truly is for you? That's what we're actually created for. In fact, there's something called the Law of Interdependence. And the Law of Interdependence says this, that nobody acts completely on their own. True independence is a myth because life is connected. And you know this is true because virtually every day of your life is impacted in big and small ways by people in circumstances that are beyond your control. I mean, think about a few of the easy ones. Think about the value of your home if you own a home. How much control do you really have over that? Yeah, you can do some things, and yeah, you can try this and that, but the value of your home is largely beyond your control. The value maybe of your retirement or your 401k, you do have some control, but the real control is beyond your controlling. Think about the length of the commute to work. None of us have any control over that whatsoever. What about the health of your marriage? There's only so much you can do. There's other people involved. What about the way your kids turn out? You're just parents, and they're people too, and they're going to make decisions. And there's things that are just out of your control. See, there's a lot at stake in this, and only some of the circumstances and influences are within our control. But when you embed yourself in a healthy, functioning, interdependent community, here's what happens. People around you are constantly checking on you, aren't they? Especially when you're young and maybe you're acting inappropriately. In fact, psychologists say that when people are checking on kids because they're acting inappropriately, that it actually helps kids stay sane. Students, if you're hearing me, listen, I know when your parents check up on you, you think they're crazy. Honestly, psychologists say they're helping you not be crazy. So when you look around at our culture, you're like, people are insane. That's exactly right. Like clinically, that's right. We have isolated ourselves, and when we do, we have a tendency towards insanity. People navigating difficult circumstances alone do irrational, insane things. We cannot live our best life. We cannot live the life God has called us and wants for us to live independently of other people. And could I just push on this for just a second? Here's the truth. There's a lot of things wrong with you. I mean, there is, and there is with me too. I mean, come on, isn't there things we can't see? Like you have stuff that you do, and if you were to ask somebody who really knows you well, they would tell you, yeah, you have stuff, and that stuff probably ought to be dealt with. And oftentimes we feel insecure and we wrongly, and we act wrongly because of that insecurity. But when our lives are woven together interdependently with other people, they help us deal with our stuff and help us smooth out our rough edges. They let you know when your jokes aren't really that funny. And when you're about to make a huge mistake, or when you're being arrogant, or when you're being selfish. And when other people that you really care about are in need, you literally can't focus on yourself when you see them in need. And do you know how good that is for you? I know we think, oh man, I'm in this relationship, this person, and they've got this problem, and then there's crisis, and all the drama. It's like I'm going to get sucked into all of that. But do you know how good that is for you to get your focus off of yourself? When everything in culture is focusing you to focus on yourself. And when you care about somebody who's going through a difficult time, it causes you to shift your focus off yourself and onto them. That keeps us sane. It keeps you from doing stupid things. It keeps you from acting in crazy ways in healthy communities. Healthy, interdependent communities where we share life's burdens together. And sometimes you carry those for other people, and oftentimes you're offloading those things that are weighing you down on them, and that's the way we were designed to operate. You're not meant to be on your own. In fact, you're actually meant to be with one another. That phrase shows up over 100 times in the New Testament, where we're to love one another and restore one another and carry one another and bear with one another and be kind to one another, accept one another and encourage one another and submit to one another. These things matter. And so let me ask you, what friendships are you missing in your life that do these things? And in turn, you do them back for them. You need different types of friendships. You need friendships that help you learn and grow. You grow from them. You need friendships that are fun and relaxing. Or maybe you have people that you go out and you have fun with, but you have no one that you can confide in. And maybe you only have one person that you go to for help, but let me just tell you, that's not enough because it can be too much for that person. You also need friends that give you practical help. Like things that you're doing that can help you. Or maybe you just lack people in your life that challenge you to become the best version of yourself. And that's what happened to David. He isolated himself from the friends that he needed. And so you know what God did? God sent David a friend. And we know his name. His name was Nathan. Someone David could trust and a person that could get close to the king. And so one day, Nathan comes to David, and he comes to see him, and he says, David, hey, I want to tell you a story. And the story is about a rich man and a poor man. And he says, this rich man was entertaining guests who came through town, and the rich man was going to have them stay at his nice big house, and he was going to feed them really good food and prepare a meal for them. But instead, David listened closely, instead of using his own wealth or riches or his own cattle or livestock, what he does is he goes to the poor man's house and he steals the poor man's only lamb. And it was more than just a lamb to him, it was like a family pet for his family. But the rich man steals it, slaughters it, entertains, and feeds his guest. And David is on the edge of his chair because when he hears the story, here's what we're told is that David burned with anger. He is so mad, and he says to Nathan, who is that man? Because I vow to kill that rich man. Who did this? And Nathan looked King David right in the eyes and said, David, it's you. You're the man. God gave you everything, your kingdom, your family, your wealth. And if it wasn't enough, he even told you he would have given you more. Much, much more. And Nathan asked David the question, why? Why then have you despised the word of the Lord and done this horrible deed? Why did you do this? And I'll tell you why. It's at the beginning of the story. In the spring of the year, when the kings normally go out to war, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. He isolated himself. He saw himself above the people around him. He saw himself as different than everyone else in the community. And he operated independently, isolating himself, eventually hurting himself, and so many others of the people around him. Could I just say something very boldly to you as your friend? Taking life on your own doesn't make you strong. It makes you insane. It makes you stupid. It makes us crazy. It makes us do things we wouldn't normally do. And here's the thing. Some today, you need a Nathan in your life. But you're keeping that Nathan at an arm's distance. You're keeping them away. And maybe it's that person that you're resisting allowing in, and they keep pursuing you, but you don't let them in because you know what they're going to tell you. And you know that when they see behind the curtain and the scenes, they're going to challenge you. But could that be the person that your spouse or your parents or your kids have just been praying to God that he would bring this person into your life? Trust me, you want to find a Nathan before God has to send you one. Because when God has to send you one, the circumstances of your life are not your best life. And here's the thing. If I could just plead with you, you were not designed to face life's successes or struggles on your own. You were designed for one another. That's why God gave us one another in a community of people called the church family that would walk alongside us. It's why engaging with one another and taking a step to be with other people and serve one another and help one another, as I talked about at the beginning of the message, is so important. Being in a church family, it's so important not to come and to look good and pretend to be good and then leave and then just go live your independent life this week, but to be interdependent. and to be that help for one another. Let me pray for us. Father, I thank you for the story of King David that challenges us so deeply to our core. There's none of us here that can pretend that our society, that our culture, and probably the majority of us are not struggling through this very thing. And thank you for the examples of potential, even warning examples of what could happen if we stay in the isolation that we're in. So would you challenge us with this message today to go further than we ever have, and to take a step and to begin to serve with one another, and to begin to be with one another, and to begin to challenge one another, and help with one another, and bear with one another, and to come around this community and make it that community for our lives that we need so desperately. And I pray that you would challenge us deep into the core of our soul to be reminded that this is what Jesus followers are, and this is what Jesus followers do. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.